Love is a mystery that has fascinated humanity throughout history. Poets, philosophers, and scientists have tried to decode why we fall in love, what attracts us to another person, and what invisible forces lead us to create deep connections. Today, we'll explore this question from a unique perspective, that of Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century. Jung didn't see love as a simple set of passing emotions or an attraction based on biology. For him, love was a mirror of our internal world, a reflection of what we lack and, at the same time, what we most desire to find. According to Jung, people fall in love with you for only two reasons. But before we discover what they are, there's something you need to understand: love is not an accident. We don't fall in love randomly. There's a deep pattern, almost unconscious, that dictates our choices and drives us toward certain people and not others. And that pattern has roots in the depths of our psyche. Carl Jung spoke of a fascinating concept: projection. According to him, when we meet someone and feel that instant, inexplicable attraction, what's really happening is that we're projecting aspects of our own unconscious onto that person. In other words, we fall in love with something that, on some level, already exists within us, but that we don't consciously recognize. Think about this. Have you ever felt attracted to someone who represents exactly what you'd like to be? Perhaps someone self-assured, with impressive inner strength, or with a freedom you feel you lack. It's no coincidence. Jung would say that what actually attracts you to that person is a repressed part of yourself desperately seeking to come to light. This brings us to the first reason someone falls in love with you: because you represent something they don't have but desperately need. Have you heard the phrase, opposites attract? Though it sounds cliché, there's a psychological truth behind it. Jung believed that every human being has a hidden side he called the shadow. This shadow contains everything we repress, everything we don't want to accept about ourselves, but which, paradoxically, we seek in others. For example, a very rational person might fall madly in love with someone emotional and spontaneous. An introverted individual might feel an irresistible attraction to someone extroverted and social. What's actually happening is that this person represents something the other has repressed inside. It's as if our unconscious were saying, "There's what I'm missing." But this is just the first reason. There's a second one, equally powerful, which has to do with an even deeper concept in Jungian theory: the anima and animus. According to Jung, within every man there exists an internal image of the feminine, which he called anima, and within every woman, an internal image of the masculine, which he called animus. These images form throughout life from our experiences, especially in childhood. When we meet someone who embodies these internal characteristics, we feel an instant and irrational attraction. In other words, we fall in love because that person awakens something that already existed within us. This isn't about finding our soulmate, as fairy tales claim, but about someone who resonates with a deep and unknown part of ourselves. Here's the great irony of love: we don't fall in love with someone for who they really are, but for what they represent to our psyche. But here a problem arises: if we fall in love with someone because we project a part of ourselves onto that person, what happens when reality doesn't match the image we've created? This explains why many relationships that begin with burning passion end in disappointment. When the illusion of projection disappears, we realize the person we loved wasn't exactly as we imagined. We discover their flaws, fears, weaknesses, and at that moment, we have two options: either accept the real person with all that implies, or reject them and continue looking for someone else who fits our idealized image. The problem is that many people never break this cycle. They go from one relationship to another, always looking for someone to fill their void, to complete their shadow, to perfectly fit the image they've built in their unconscious. Jung invites us to do something different. Instead of seeking in others what we lack, we should work to integrate those parts within ourselves. If you're a shy person attracted to extroverts, maybe it's time to develop your own confidence. If you fall in love with secure, independent people, ask yourself what aspects of your life make you feel dependent or insecure. Love, according to Jung, isn't finding someone who completes us, but discovering ourselves through our relationships. Why do some people seem to repeat the same patterns in their relationships? Why does someone who suffered abandonment in childhood seem to attract partners who end up leaving? Why does someone afraid of vulnerability fall in love with people who demand an intense emotional connection? The answer lies in what Jung called the original wound. We all carry a psychological wound that forms in our early years. This wound can manifest in many ways: fear of rejection, feeling not good enough, difficulty trusting others, and though we're often not conscious of it, it influences our romantic choices more than we'd like to admit. If someone falls in love with you, it's possible that at an unconscious level, you represent a key piece in their healing process. Perhaps your way of being reminds them of something from their childhood, something their psyche is trying to resolve. Or perhaps their attraction to you is related to the need to face a deep fear or insecurity. But here's the crucial point: the fact that someone falls in love with you for these reasons doesn't mean the relationship will be easy or even healthy. In fact, many of the most intense and passionate relationships are also the ones that can cause the most pain, precisely because they touch very deep wounds. Jung said that love is one of the most powerful paths to personal transformation, and this means that when two people fall in love, they'll inevitably face their own shadows. This is why many relationships that begin with overwhelming intensity end in chaos and conflict, because love brings out not only the best in us but also what we prefer to keep hidden. Perhaps you've experienced this. At the beginning of a relationship, everything is perfect. You feel this person understands you in a way no one else has. But over time, conflicts arise, tensions, differences that seem impossible to reconcile. This is no coincidence. It's how love forces us to evolve. And here's where many people fail: they confuse love with comfort. They believe a relationship should always be easy and problem-free. But real love, the love Jung described, isn't simply being with someone who makes us feel good, it's being with someone who challenges us to be the best version of ourselves. That's why people fall in love with you, not just because they project onto you what they lack, but also because somehow you're destined to help them see a part of themselves they need to work on. Another aspect of love that's rarely analyzed in depth is the idea of the other as a reflection of our psychological destiny. For Jung, each person we interact with, especially those with whom we establish deep bonds, has a purpose in our evolution. It's no coincidence that certain people enter our lives at specific moments. Sometimes they're a mirror of who we are at that instant, other times, they're a preview of what we can become. Imagine crossing paths with someone whose confidence and self-assurance dazzle you. You might feel an immediate attraction, as if this person had something you desire. But what Jung would tell us is that this attraction isn't to the other person per se, but because deep down, they're showing you a version of yourself that you haven't yet fully developed. The same happens with people who challenge us, who bring out the worst in us, who make us lose patience or feel vulnerable. These relationships, though uncomfortable, are equally important. Jung called this the process of confrontation with the shadow. Our shadow contains everything we've repressed throughout our lives: fears, hidden desires, insecurities, aspects of our personality we've learned to hide to be accepted by society. But when we fall in love, our shadow activates. This means that love isn't just an act of connection with another human being, but also a process of self-exploration. If a relationship provokes intense emotions in you, positive or negative, it's because it's touching aspects of your unconscious that need to be integrated. That's why some relationships transform us completely. After them, we're never the same again, because what's really changed isn't the other person, but what we've discovered about ourselves. But there's something even more intriguing in Jung's theory: the idea that the people who impact us most in life don't appear randomly. He spoke of the concept of synchronicity, the idea that certain encounters aren't coincidences but manifestations of a deeper order in the universe. Surely you've experienced something like this: meeting someone at the exact moment you needed them most, feeling an immediate connection with someone who seems to have been waiting in your path. From Jung's perspective, these connections aren't mere chance, they're part of a process of personal evolution. People fall in love with you because, on a certain level, their souls are seeking an experience that only you can provide. It might be a learning experience, a transformation, the closing of a cycle. And you, in turn, also fall in love with people who are destined to teach you something about yourself. This leads us to a fascinating idea: what happens when someone enters our life, awakens intense emotions in us, and then disappears? If you've ever experienced a fleeting but unforgettable love, a deep connection that for some reason couldn't continue, then you've experienced synchronicity in its highest expression. Jung would say that this person wasn't meant to stay but to leave you a message, something you needed to learn at that moment in your life. And here's where many suffer, because most of us want love to be permanent, for relationships to last forever. But Jung would remind us that the true purpose of love isn't permanence but growth. Some people stay with you throughout your life, others will appear just for an instant. But all leave a mark on your evolution. If people fall in love with us because we represent something they need on their path, how can we be more aware of this process? How can we use this knowledge to build more authentic and meaningful relationships? Love isn't just a reflection of what we are but also of what we might become. In each person who enters our life, there's a hidden message, a clue about something our unconscious is trying to show us. Jung spoke of the importance of the individuation process, which is the path toward total integration of our being. To achieve this, we need to go through different phases of self-discovery, and relationships are one of the most powerful tools to accelerate this process. If you look closely, you'll notice that each love you've experienced has brought to light a different part of you. Perhaps one relationship taught you to be stronger, another showed you your capacity for giving, another forced you to face your deepest fears. But there's something even more intriguing: not everyone who falls in love with you does so for the same reasons. Depending on the moment in your life, you'll attract different types of people. If you're in a period of growth, you'll likely attract someone who challenges you to go further. If you're in a phase of insecurity, you might attract someone who reinforces those fears, forcing you to face them. This is where many people get confused. They believe relationships are simply coincidences, or that love is a matter of luck. But if you analyze your life carefully, you'll notice a pattern. The people who have appeared in your path have been reflections of your internal state. What you've attracted has been in tune with what your psyche needed to experience at that moment. That's why some relationships seem inevitable, almost as if they had been written somewhere before they occurred. It's not magic or fate in a supernatural sense, but the manifestation of unconscious processes seeking growth. When someone falls in love with you, they're not just seeing what you are on the surface, but what you represent on a deeper level. It might be an echo of their past, a symbol of their future, or an opportunity to face something they've been avoiding. Why do some people feel an intense attraction to someone but then flee? Why are there those who seem incapable of maintaining a stable relationship, though they deeply desire love? Jung would give us a clear answer: the fear of transformation. True love changes us, it forces us to see parts of ourselves that perhaps we don't want to face. It puts us in situations of vulnerability, forces us to trust, to let go of control, to open ourselves to another person with no guarantee we won't be hurt. And many people, although they don't consciously know it, aren't ready for that kind of transformation. That's why some relationships never materialize, even though the attraction is strong. That's why some people seem trapped in patterns of self-sabotage, moving away from love just when they're about to experience it in its most authentic form. The problem isn't a lack of love but the fear of what love might provoke within us. This fear manifests in many ways. Some people develop a pattern of self-sabotage, moving away just when the relationship begins to deepen. Others create unnecessary conflicts as an unconscious way to avoid the real bond. Then there are those who feel attracted to emotionally inaccessible people, which allows them to experience desire without having to face real commitment. In all these cases, the problem isn't a lack of love but the fear of what love might reveal, because love doesn't just unite us with another person, it also forces us to confront our own wounds. Jung explained that the only way to overcome these fears is through individuation, the process of integrating all parts of our being, including those we've rejected. To achieve this, we must first recognize our own patterns. We must ask ourselves, why am I attracted to certain types of people? What kind of relationships have I repeated in my life? What emotions emerge when someone gets too close? It's difficult work because it implies confronting our own wounds, but it's necessary if we want to experience authentic love. Many people seek love as a form of escape, hoping a relationship will help them fill an internal void. But true love doesn't work that way. Instead of filling voids, it exposes them. Instead of giving us immediate security, it challenges us to build it within ourselves. That's why people fall in love with us not just for who we are on the surface but for the energy we project. If we're in a state of fear, we'll attract people who reinforce that fear. If we're in a process of growth, we'll attract people who help us continue evolving. This explains why some relationships seem to be lessons disguised as love. Some people come into our lives not to stay but to teach us something essential. Others appear when we're ready for something deeper and more lasting. But here enters another key concept in Jung's theory, the integration of the anima and animus. The anima is the feminine part within the man, and the animus is the masculine part within the woman. According to Jung, every human being carries within themselves a combination of both energies, and the way we relate to others reflects the degree of integration of these energies within us. When a person hasn't integrated their anima or animus, they tend to project it onto others. That is, they look for in their partner what they haven't developed in themselves. A man who rejects his emotional side might feel attracted to extremely sensitive and emotional women, while a woman who fears her own independence might feel attracted to dominant and self-assured men. The problem arises when these projections generate dependency. If a person deposits in their partner all they haven't developed in themselves, the relationship becomes a sort of transaction where each depends on the other to feel complete. But this type of love isn't authentic because it doesn't arise from integration but from lack. That's why Jung emphasized the importance of self-knowledge in relationships. The more aware we are of our own psyche, the less we project onto others, and the freer we are to love without fear or dependency. If love is a mirror of our psyche, how can we distinguish between a relationship based on projection and one based on authentic love? The difference lies in how the relationship makes us feel. If a relationship is based on projection, it generates anxiety, insecurity, and fear of loss. If it's based on authentic love, it generates growth and a sense of fullness that doesn't depend on the other but on what we've developed within ourselves. Many people confuse intensity with love. They believe a relationship full of emotional ups and downs is more real than a stable, calm relationship. But intensity without depth is just an illusion. Jung would teach us that true love isn't a roller coaster of extreme emotions but a space of mutual transformation where both people can evolve without fear. This leads us to a fundamental truth: love isn't something we find in another person, it's something we discover within ourselves. And the more we know ourselves, the more capable we are of attracting relationships that reflect our internal state, because love isn't just a feeling, it's a process of awakening. People fall in love with us not just for what we are but for what we represent in their own journey of self-discovery. And we, in turn, fall in love with those who help us see parts of ourselves that we haven't yet recognized. It's a game of mirrors, a labyrinth of projections and learnings. But deep down, love is nothing more than the path toward total integration of our being. Love is a phenomenon that manifests in unexpected ways, and in each story, there's an invisible thread connecting our past experiences with the present. If we observe carefully, we can see that there are patterns in the way people come into our lives. It's not a matter of chance but of resonance. Jung spoke of synchronicity, the idea that certain events aren't causally linked but still have a profound meaning in the context of love. This means that people don't appear in our path by chance, there's a reason behind each encounter, even if we don't understand it at the moment. For example, some feel an instant connection with someone without having exchanged many words. It's as if they already knew each other from somewhere, though it's the first time they've met. This phenomenon can be explained from the perspective of the collective unconscious, that network of shared symbols and experiences that influences our perceptions and reactions. When two people meet and feel an immediate attraction, it's possible their unconscious minds have recognized something in the other before their conscious minds do. Perhaps there's a deep affinity between their internal archetypes, or perhaps they've lived similar experiences that have prepared them to meet at that moment. But what's fascinating is that not all intense connections are meant to last. Some people enter our life just to catalyze a change. They're like sparks that ignite a transformation, but once they fulfill their purpose, they vanish. This can be painful because the rational mind seeks stability and permanence. However, Jung would teach us that each relationship has a purpose, and clinging to something that has already fulfilled its cycle only generates suffering. This is where the importance of individuation comes in. When we understand that love isn't just about finding someone who completes us but about discovering ourselves in the process, we stop resisting the natural changes of life. In this sense, there are people who fall in love with us not because we're the perfect partner for them but because in us, they see an opportunity for evolution. In the same way, we feel attracted to those who offer us a mirror in which we can see hidden aspects of our psyche. Sometimes these connections are harmonious and lead us to mutual growth. Other times, they're chaotic and challenging because they force us to face aspects of ourselves we prefer to ignore. For instance, if a person has repressed their creative side for years, they might feel irresistibly attracted to someone who embodies creativity and freedom. But instead of simply admiring that quality, they might experience contradictory feelings, admiration mixed with envy, desire accompanied by fear. This is because the unconscious is projecting onto the other a part of itself that has been repressed. Love, in this case, isn't just a connection with the other but a call to integrate that forgotten part of one's own identity. That's why some relationships seem designed to shake us to the core. They aren't comfortable or easy, but they leave an indelible mark on our psyche. They force us to grow, to question ourselves, to break with old patterns. However, not all relationships are destined to be stormy. There are connections that flow naturally without the need for intense conflicts. When two people have worked on their own self-knowledge, love becomes a space of expansion instead of a constant struggle. This brings us to an essential question: the way we experience love is directly related to our level of consciousness. The more we know ourselves, the more capable we are of choosing relationships that reflect our internal state. If a person is full of unresolved fears and insecurities, they'll likely attract chaotic relationships that reinforce those emotions. If, on the other hand, they've worked on their individuation process, they'll attract connections that nurture their growth instead of repeating old traumas. But this doesn't mean love should be a mechanical process where we choose a partner like someone choosing a product in a store. There's a mystery in love that can't be reduced to formulas or rational explanations. Sometimes the most powerful connections are those we can't explain with words. They're encounters that seem to defy logic but resonate with a deeper truth that only the heart can understand. Love, in its essence, isn't a destination but a path, a journey in which each person we meet leaves us a teaching, whether through pleasure or pain. And the more open we are to learning from these experiences, the more capable we'll be of experiencing love in its purest form, not as a need to complete something we lack, but as a celebration of what we already are. People fall in love with us for two fundamental reasons: because we reflect something they yearn for and because we activate a part of themselves that was waiting to be recognized.